Yesterday, I spent a lot of time researching what the latest headlines were out in the US, specifically around like employment, the current state of the job market, trends that are being identified over the last several weeks, right? Something that I do on a regular basis to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the wide world of work. And at the end of my professional development hour, I spent a lot of time thinking about you and like the fact that when job seekers are consuming this information or whatever mean or modium or whatever medium or method you're consuming it, be it you're listening to career influencers or you're reading articles on your favorite social media networking platform, or are you, if you're listening, watching the news, if you're listening to your colleagues and your coworkers and your family members. I remember thinking yesterday after all of that, it's like, wow, if I didn't have the knowledge base that I have about the job market and knowing how to, future proof your career and be career adaptable, I would be fearful. If I was the Marthea that I was about 15, 16, 17 years ago, I would be fearful with the headlines that are out in the world. And so today I wanted to come with you and share with you three ways, right, to move forward in your career when everything feels so uncertain. Okay. Because the truth is, when you don't have all of the information you need to understand, like, this is just a moment in time and it will pass, and there's ways to navigate this moment. Taking in all of this information could be a lot. It could be a lot because it is out there. So I wanted to share three ways to move forward in your career and everything feels uncertain. So what I'm going to talk about today really is the center of what is called career self-management. So career self-management is the ongoing process of managing your own career, right? You all know, because I'm not clinical, right, that a large part of uncertainty and fear is because a person lacks control over the situation. And so, what's most definitely happening in the job market right now is causing people to feel like they are losing control. The job market is no longer feels safe or predictable, especially for social workers who didn't necessarily have to work super hard to get jobs, and they could over rely or lean heavily on their credentials and their degree attainment credentials and things like that. But the reality is that the social service sector is being attacked large, as much as any other industry or sector. So for a lot of social workers, every time you hear about a bill being eliminated or redacted or changed or broken down or whatever it is that they're doing in the new administration, it is removing another piece to that safety net that you had when it came to your career. So, career self management is the ongoing process of managing your own career, even in an uncertain job market, even in a volatile job market. Career self management requires self analysis. It requires you to set goals, seek growth. It requires you to be self promoting. It requires you to learn and take responsibility for your career, your trajectory. So, whereas in the past, when the job market felt safer for people, a lot of people relied heavily just on the name of being a social worker. However, now where we are in the job market and the fact that our specific industry is so heavily under attack, it's going to require you to move into more of the career self-management phase where you take charge of your career, where you take charge of what you're doing. Whereas before, when you leaned heavily into the awareness and the branding of being a social worker, a lot of what you did in your career was just heavily dictated by the profession as a whole. If all of the social workers are going one way, you go that way, right? You follow the trend of the profession. However, where we are right now in the nation, in the US, it's going to require you to become the leader of your own career because your profession is under attack. So I want to talk you through three very realistic ways to start practicing career self management, which for a lot of people is going to be a drastic change. One of my recent micro to macro career accelerator coaching clients told me when she first started the accelerator that up until this point, she's a medical social worker. She was like, up until this point, I've never had to work hard for a job. She was like, if you breathe, if you had breath in your body and you had the letters after your name, you can get a travel medical social work job. She was like, I've never had to work hard. I never had to think about what is the process to get a job. Hence her reason for coming inside of the accelerator. And me taking that conversation along with reading the headlines yesterday, it really made me think more about the fact like what I think you all need to hear right now is how to start leaning heavily into career self management because the making or breaking of your career, the vehicle that you use to sustain your life and to do this bigger, impactful work in the world right now is going to rely heavily on you. So let's get into it. The first way that you move forward in your career, and I'm looking at my notes, the first way that you move forward in your career when everything feels uncertain is that you need to reevaluate what your goals are and what your key focus areas are. Um, what I've seen with social workers over the years is that many of them are chasing goals that no longer fit the version of who they are today, that no longer fit the aspirations they have either personally or professionally. And so as a result of that, they are in this perpetual misaligned state because they're chasing things that they necessarily don't want to do. And it's costing them time, money, energy, capacity, and all of these other things that they could be using elsewhere in their life. So, for number one, how you move forward in an uncertain job market is by first reevaluating your goals and your key focus areas, not just for your professional life, but for your personal life. What is it that you see yourself doing career wise or personal wise in the next 2 to 3 years? Where do you see yourself being in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see yourself being in the next 10 plus years? And I write them down, identify them. For many of you, it's going to require you to divorce something that's been on your list for the last 10 plus years. Because if you are real honest with yourself, you haven't really wanted to do that thing for the last 2 years, but you've been spinning your wheels trying to make it happen, and it's not really something that you're bought into. Also, for a lot of social workers, the truth is some of the things on your list are on there simply because you don't know that you have other options. So, step number one is really a stage where you're going to have to reevaluate the legitimacy of the goal or the thing that you have listed on your list, right? Is this on my list because I'm settling? Is this on my list because this is the only thing that I've ever seen with my eyes and heard with my ears? So I think it's the only thing that's possible. Is this on my list because I'm struggling in belief in my ability to do something bigger? And so I'm just settling on this thing. Is this on my list because I've only seen people around me do it? Is this on my list because my third grade teacher told me 25 years ago I should do the thing? Is this on my list because my social work professor did it, right? You first need to reevaluate your goals and your career focus areas. Have they changed? Has the landscape around you changed? For me, I had to come to the realization in the last few years that Some of the things that I had on my goal post list, on my goal list, were designed because I was in a small geographical rural town. So everything that I dreamed about, I had to make fit into this small little circle. And the city literally is a circle, okay? In this small little circle. But once I began to expand out and I began to be exposed to different other geographical regions, I realized that my goal list is way bigger than this one little circle. Okay, so it was time for me to reevaluate. So I encourage you to do the same thing. Has your landscape around you changed and it now requires you to dream bigger, to want bigger, to desire bigger? This is where you need to change that because many of you are chasing this thing and you've outgrown it. Do you need to evolve, right? So what I had to realize was, yes, I was jamming myself into this little small rule circle, but also a large part of that was that I needed to evolve as a person. I needed to accept and acknowledge that I had outgrown this space. I had to accept and acknowledge like all the years that I had been doing my work, that I'm now a different version of myself and it requires me to catch up with the version that I am actualizing into mindset wise. So for many of you, you have evolved, but you're still operating and showing up in the world as a social worker who only had 1 year of experience. Now you have 5 years. Now you have 10 years. Now you're a homeowner. Maybe you want to become a homeowner, whereas before you was just focused on getting a paycheck. Maybe before you were just working with any population, but you're realizing like I'm super passionate about youth. And I only want to work on behalf of youth. This is where you have to get clear because the truth is, what I've learned in working with hundreds of social workers at this point is that many of you are at the version of yourself professionally because it was the only option that you had. That is not really what you want to do. What I always tell people, and I have been on point with this from the very, every time I say it is always on point. The thing that you really, really like y'all really want to be doing in your career is what you wanted to do when you first went to college, undergrad. But you didn't see a direct correlation between the degree program and a job. And it was much more easier for you to identify a social work job. So you settled, right? And what do I mean? What do you mean, Martha? It was much easier for me to identify a social work job. You get a social work degree and you go look for a job that says social work in it. But as an example, if you get a degree in, let me make up something, a degree in, uh I'm drawing a blank. If you get a degree like in social sciences, you're not necessarily, you don't want to be like a social scientist. You're not necessarily going to go to a job board right now and find a job title with social scientist in it, right? I think that's what the lure or the draw is for social workers to the public health profession because you get a public health degree and then you go find a job that says public health in it, right? It's not as easy to make that connection when you have a degree type that's not like directly corresponded with a job title, right? So let's, as another example, maybe you majored in chemistry, but you knew you didn't necessarily want to become a chemist. It's not as easy to then identify jobs that would like suit someone who majored in chemistry if you're not looking at chemistry jobs, right? So for because of that, many of you settled, right? Another example also that I've seen recently with social workers is in undergrad, people being first in criminal justice majors, but being clear that they don't want to be in law enforcement and they don't want to be in prisons, that they actually want to improve the system, not be a worker in the system. But because they didn't know how to make that happen other than being a lawyer, they didn't know how to use a criminal justice degree to do something like that. They switched over to social work to get a social worker job that they know then has the ability to maybe work in a jail or work in a prison, and you're working with people to help, help them reintegrate into society, right? That's another example. So I say all that to say that it may be time for you to get back to what you originally wanted to do. But the difference between that version of you who couldn't make that connection in the beginning and the version of you now is that you have more resources and capacity to figure it out, right? That's what I help you do. I can help you figure out how to take that criminal justice interest, love that you had in the beginning, and how we can morph that into a macro social work career where you're not upholding the system, but you're working to make the system a little bit better for the people that are flowing through it, right? So reevaluate your goals and key focus areas. The second way that how you move forward in your career when everything feels uncertain is that you need to focus on what you can control. And I wrote here in my notes my favorite saying that I adopted when I was working in call centers with my high school diploma and state agencies: pick and choose your battles. I see a lot. I observe a lot. I just don't say a lot. And one of the biggest energy drains, and time wasters that I see social workers participating in just like every day, like you breathe air, is that you all spend a lot of time on stuff that don't really matter at the end of the day. Things that don't really make a difference in your immediate life or even in the lives of people that you know. Okay, so I say that with all love, right? We are in a time right now where you need to be a little bit selfish with your time. Last week I did a pie. I talked in my stories around the fact of how when I was dealing with severe time poverty and I was working my case management job with 120 plus caseloads, and I was working 2 to 3 additional jobs, and I was working on my MSW degree full time at the time, and I'm a full time single mother making $37,100. At that time, my mind was solely focused on how to exchange my time for money, right? My whole thought process was only on how to make money, save money, and stretch the money that I had, right? So what that looks like was I was surrounded by people who thought that same way. That was their focus as well. And it wasn't until I believe I was in my first macro job. I believe I was. I was in my first macro job and I was making the most money I had ever made in my career. I had literally just graduated my MSW degree. I was making so much money that I could, well, I think it was my second one. I don't know which one it was. I've had quite a few at this point, but I was making the most money that I've ever made. I was able to went from a place where I could before as a case manager and as a call center representative in state governmental agencies, I could only pay my rent by taking half of my first of the biweekly paychecks. Okay, my first paycheck I would take out half to pay rent. I would take the other half to pay rent, and then I would have to use my my first and second extra job that I had to pay like my light bills and things like that, right? Then I moved into my macro job and I was able to pay all of my bills out of my first biweekly paycheck. And then my second one, I spent it how I wanted to spend it. I saved, I did all of the things, right? So when I made that shift, that is when, and then in the subsequent years after that, and then as I began to invest in lots of business coaching monetarily, I've invested a lot of money, thousands of dollars in receiving business coaching, right? And it changed my life tremendously beyond just my business. And one of the things that I learned really helps me still to this day was the fact that I was a walking, talking billboard for a lack mindset when it came to money. But even deeper than that, I had a lack mindset when it came to my time, right? I did not understand that every minute that I exchanged for a dollar was literal in my life, right? Because I had to literally be on someone's job, sitting at their desk, doing their work for a dollar, right? And because I worked 2 to 3 jobs at any given time, all the way through my case management days, right? It left no room for me to live. It left no room for me to spend time with my daughter. It left no room for me to spend time with my family. It left no room for me to learn hobbies, have a hobby. To this day, I don't have hobbies. I'm trying to work on that, right? I say all that to say that it had me in a perpetual state of being able to understand that time is your biggest resource and that you should do whatever is possible to protect your time, right? And one of the biggest ways that I see social workers being guilty of not doing that is the same way I was doing it, where you're working multiple jobs and it's just going on year after year, or even volunteering. For many of you all, you volunteer a lot of your time away because you're so in such a misaligned state in your regular 9 to 5 job, and you're not doing the work you really, really, really want to do. So you go out and you create these additional endeavors. You volunteer for these committees and these organizations and things like that. When in essence, that time that you are spending, yes, it's great work, but for many of you all, you're doing it more so to like legitimize yourself and again to fulfill what you're void of in your career. But what I learned was that when you are off work, that's time that you should be investing in yourself, that's not connected to like a career goal, that's not connected to legitimizing yourself professionally. It's when you should be out in the world touching the grass. It's when you should be out in the world taking nature walks. It's when you should be at somebody kitchen, community kitchen, baking sourdough bread from starters. It's when you should be building Legos. It's when you should be doing crosswords and word searches. I'm a word search girl. It's when you should be out playing pickleball with your friends and learning chess and taking swimming lessons and going on horseback riding, right? Horseback back riding, right? Is what I call, you should not be doing work like activities. You should be doing human activities. Okay. So pick and choose your battles is a point of you need to get clear on what it is. What is your key priority areas? Like, because a lot of you are spending your time and energy on stuff that's not moving you forward. Yeah, it's moving other people forward. But when you look up in 5 to 10 years, you're still the person without a hobby. You're still the person that's working on bettering yourself. But then at the same time, you still feel like you're in the same spot. Everybody else around you has grown up as a result of you over giving your minutes that you'll never get back, and you still are in the perpetual same place. And that's not me talking at you. That's me telling you about a real experience because I've experienced that before. So one of the things that you have to do when you are in this required career self-management phase is you need to focus on what you can control. And how you do that is by picking and choosing your battles. Everything doesn't need you to be involved to move it forward. The people will figure it out. It's time for you to focus on you. Okay, so focus on what you can control. Focus on what moves your agenda forward. And as a byproduct, you will help others move their agenda forward as well. Okay, number two, focus your energy on high leverage actions that move you closer to your next step. So I just talked about in number two, how you need to focus on what you control, focus on pushing your own agenda forward rather than the agendas of others through these work like activities and all of the things that y'all like to do for so-called fun, right? Number two is where you begin to actualize the steps to do that, right? So one of the biggest things that I coach my coaching clients through is the creation of realistic goals, right? the creation of realistic goals. One thing I know about us as high achieving social workers is that we are the queens and kings and the people and the humans of creating unrealistic goals. Right? Even though we know about SMART goals, we know about realistic, time measured, time driven, all of the different, we know about that. You are still guilty of creating unrealistic goals. So, the first thing that you need to do is focus your energy on identifying high leverage goal actions. Because a lot of the times, what happens is your fear has you doing time wasting activities, things that don't really move you forward, but to your nervous system, they kind of feel good. But when you're done with it, it really ain't get you nowhere. But it was just because you were afraid to take the big momentum building action step. This is where you have to stop doing that. This is where you have to like get real with yourself about what are you doing? Is this an actionable step or is this just something to make me look good on paper? Right? So one of the ways that I say I can just give an example, right? Is apply for the job. Come to my workshop. Sign up for my coaching program, right? But when you do informational interviews, that's not moving you forward to anything, right? I don't know who told y'all to do that, but I wish that I don't hear people say it as much anymore, so I take it that y'all learning. But whoever told y'all to do informational interviews really led you astray. So if you're still doing it, I want you to stop. I want you to take real action. I want you to go look at a job. I want you to come to a workshop to learn how to look at jobs. I'm getting ready to have a how you're already qualified for macro social work job workshop. I'm going to start advertising for it in the next week. It's a minimal investment. In that workshop, I'm going to be teaching you, I'm going to show you how to read a macro social work job description. That is an actionable item because you learning how to read that job description in that workshop will then help you better interpret your eligibility for a macro job, real job that you could apply for tomorrow, right? But an informational interview, you're just sitting on Zoom or in real time with someone and they're talking about their career trajectory in a job. And I'm gonna say this: the reason that is not good is because y'all don't know when to stop. And like I said, the fear, the issues, that's where they go to live. Like I met a social worker one time. She told me she had been doing informational interviews for 2 years. I said, have you hit apply on anything? Have you gone to an interview? Like, I wasn't laughing. I was very sincere. She hadn't applied to a job. She was stuck in the vicious cycle of doing informational interviews. I said, so what are you looking for at this point that you haven't heard in 2 years? And she wasn't looking for anything. It was just that her fear, which uncertainty freezes you. And you will get to a point with anything where you can have information overload. That's why in the micro to macro career accelerator, I have a streamlined process. There's 3 steps. Well, I don't call them steps. There's a 3 component process that I teach you all to know how to identify, apply, and interview for macro jobs. Because when you have too much information from too many different sources that sound in too many different ways, or if you're going into the process without the level of clarity, you're going to freeze, right? You're going to feel overwhelmed. And if you're not dealing with any like confidence issues that are bubbling below the surface as well, it's going to freeze you. So for this person, she had literally been doing informational interviews for 2 years and had not taken any concrete, measurable action to move her closer to the macro job that she said she wanted. And a large part of that was because she didn't have clarity. But that's a whole nother conversation. But that goes back to step one, reevaluate your goals and key focus areas. All right. So, how to move forward in your career when everything feels uncertain. This is a time where you take control. You don't rely on anyone else to take control over your career and what you should be doing. This is the time for you to practice career self-management and you take control of your own future, your own like goals, your own things that you are doing. It's time for you to take ownership of it. You have relinquished control long enough. We are at a point in time in the job market where it's going to require you to lean on you, not a network, not on what the social workers around the corner say you should do, not what your professor or your clinical supervisor tell you you should do, not what your parents, not what your friends, not what your neighbors, not what the people on the TV say. This is time for you to take management of your own career. Because the truth is, we are in a point in time in the world where there's a huge lane of opportunity right before you. And if your brain is not rewired in a way to see, like, this is a huge lane of opportunity that's happening right now, for me to really become the person that I want to become, because the job market is shifting, it's changing, it's morphing into something new. I can really start blending in what I love. You're going to miss the huge lane of opportunity before you. So be on the lookout. I'm getting ready to release registration for the How You're Already Qualified for the for Macro Social Work Jobs webinars. It's a great place to start. And I'll put the link up. Also, registration for cohort 2020 for 22 of the Micro to Macro Career Accelerator will be opening in the middle of January. Be on the lookout for dates and times around when that will be and information. But in the meantime, click the link, visit macrounpaid.com and join the wait list. All the information you need to know is there about the Micro to Macro Career Accelerator. You can schedule a free get to know you chat with me to talk about if you're a good fit, what's the investment, financing options, how the program works, all of the things, so you can start moving your money around and come work with me inside of the accelerator. My coaching clients are getting jobs. The most recent job offer that we recently celebrated in our community was the week of Thanksgiving. One of my coaching clients secured her second macro social work job since working with me as the director of a telehealth company. So the employers are hiring, and my people are going on interviews every single day. Okay. That's because they're practicing career self management. They're not panicking with the rest of the world and pausing and freezing because the people say it ain't a good time to look for a job, or this, and this, and this, and that. Okay. They are creating lanes for them. They're seizing the very opportunities that everyone else is missing right now. So I'll talk to you later. Happy macro career planning. Bye.